few years ago, Peter McIndoe, a native of Little Rock, Arkansas, stumbled upon information that changed the course of his life. He learned that from 1969 through 2001, the U.S. government supposedly killed over 12 billion birds using poisonous toxins dropped from airplanes. According to his understanding, each bird killed was replaced by a surveillance drone in disguise, designed to spy on the American public. McIndoe knew that many would question why the government would do such a thing. It seemed like an excessive effort. McIndoe believed the truth was all around. Birds spying on civilians, sneaking around with their tiny spy eye cameras, not just watching, but recording, casually sitting on power lines to recharge their drone batteries, zooming in and eavesdropping on private park conversations, flying the V formations like an organized military squadron. Even bird poop was part of the plot, designed to leave tiny tracking nanobits on anyone unfortunate enough to be targeted. Their covert operations, he insisted, were so well executed that most people never stopped to question the oddities hiding in plain sight. McIndoe would often ask, "Have you ever thought about the fact that we don't see baby pigeons? That's because they come out of the factory as adults." He'd say, "Trust me, if it flies, it spies." Now, despite the apparent absurdity, he felt it was his moral obligation to share this information with the public. He became part of the Birds Aren't Real movement, eventually being promoted to be their public information officer. For 4 years, he traveled from city to city, holding rallies, meeting supporters, and putting up billboards, all in the name of deprogramming the public from what he called the bird lie. And he gained many followers, even garnering national media attention. And at one point, in one of his rallies, there were upwards of 2,000 people in attendance. Now, here's the twist. Peter never actually believed that birds were robotic drones. It was all a character he played for 4 years before he revealed the truth. He was a leader of a fake movement with fabricated evidence and made up history. McIndoe's tongue-in-cheek social experiment sought to explore how misinformation and conspiracy theories spread. But it also revealed deeper insights about human vulnerability and our deep-seated need for certainty in the time of chaos. Is it possible that people cling to conspiracy theories not because they're irrational? Maybe at its heart, the struggle isn't about being right or wrong, but about feeling seen, heard, and understood. In a world where we feel increasingly disconnected, finding someone or a group that shares your worldview, even if it's built on misinformation, can be comforting, validating, and empowering. We all know what that feels like, right? We live in a time where division touches nearly every part of our lives. And with the 2024 election within just a few weeks, just around the corner, these divides weigh heavily. Conversations with friends and family and neighbors alike can feel like battlegrounds. Now, this weekend, we observed the National Coming Out Day, and we'll celebrate LGBTQ visibility this afternoon with the Pride Parade. But we're now witnessing people having to come out of their political closets. often to the shock and at times the disownment of family and friends. It can be very challenging. Even as a minister, I sometimes struggle with how best to love and care for and connect with some folk in our communities and even some of those in my own family. So I understand how many of us don't try to connect, and I get it. There are many reasons we avoid crossing the divides. There's fear, mistrust, exhaustion. We worry about putting ourselves out there and getting hurt or taken advantage of. And with such mistrust, it's hard to believe that the other side is coming from a genuine place. And after so much rejection, sometimes we're too weary to try again. Some of us worry that reaching across the divide could cost us a piece of who we are and compromise our own values. When you add to that the weight of past hurts, group loyalty, and pride, it's no wonder we stay in our corners. Now, you might be thinking, Reverend Randy seems to be suggesting we should be building bridges. But we can't even build a basic consensus. And how do we build bridges when it feels that some folks are hell-bent on burning them down? Now, I recall a heartfelt conversation several years ago with my mentor, Reverend Dr. Tendeka, a UU minister, author, and theologian. At some point in the conversation, I realized that it was too profound not to record it, and Reverend Tendeka gave her permission. But on that recording, I shared with her my frustrations with the state of things, my weariness of always being expected to extend compassion even to those who seem undeserving or who perpetuate harm. I spoke about the racism I was seeing playing out in our nation. I told her how at times it felt like an unfair burden as persons of color. Why are we the ones always forgiving, understanding, and having to walk in awareness of the sensitivities of the dominant culture? Tendeka listened intently, absorbing my frustration. But when I was done, she paused for a moment and then said, "If it were only about racism, we could easily address it. But it's far deeper than that. We're dealing with a profound disconnection, a brokenness in people that runs beyond race and politics." She spoke of the challenge of ministering to people who've been hurt so deeply that they can no longer empathize, and how these wounds from systemic oppression or personal trauma becomes barriers to healing. She then added, "Our calling is to help transform that brokenness, to restore the capacity for empathy in people who may not even know it's missing." She said, "That's the work, whether it feels fair or not." And then, quoting Jesus' words in Matthew 5:41, she gently but firmly reminded me that as ministers, our calling is to go the second mile, to change the emotional context and content and mood of the person with whom we are in conversation. She spoke about the power of empathy and what it truly means to embody love in our ministry, explaining that when you go the second mile, you change the emotional dynamic from one of contempt to one of collaboration. Now, I was skeptical. In Matthew's gospel, Jesus refers to a common practice in the Roman-occupied Palestine where soldiers could force civilians to carry their gear for 1 mile, a burdensome reminder of their lack of power and oppression. But Jesus' challenge is, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. That second mile is an intentional act of reclaiming power through love, even if the first mile wasn't our choice to begin with. It is not about enduring harm or enabling abuse, but about reclaiming power in situations where we can respond with love. Of course, there are times when the most loving thing to do is to protect ourselves and seek our own safety. Jesus and the Bible make it sound easy and matter of fact, but I still wasn't sure I was buying what Tendeka and the Bible was selling. Then Reverend Tendeka referenced her own struggles, being a survivor of a deep personal trauma, yet choosing to embrace empathy rather than bitterness. She said, "First, I had to learn to feel my anguish. Then I could start to understand how it is that someone can hurt people they love without even knowing it." Wow, I thought, how profound. Now, as I was reviewing the audio recording for this message, my skepticism was all over the place. But I became frustrated with my earlier self because I could hear myself constantly interrupting her, trying to get my point across. Instead of actively listening, I was already preparing my response before she even finished speaking. If you were there, you might have heard me yelling at the audio, telling myself back then, "Shut up, Randy. Shut up. Listen." I was afraid that I would hear myself say something stupid or uninformed. Dimitri heard me yelling at the recording and said, "He's not listening to you, like you do me sometimes." I just stared at him like I'm doing right now. But I wasn't really listening then. And so I wasn't really hearing her. It has taken 4 years to fully appreciate what she was telling me. Sometimes people aren't able to hear us in the moment. Maybe they're just not ready at that particular point in their journey. But this time, when I listened, Tendeka's words pierced my resistance. And I began to see that the burden of empathy, heavy as it may feel, is also a gift. This kind of empathy is an opportunity to heal and to transform not just others, but ourselves. She challenged me. "Randy, if I hated all the people who hated me, there would be no room left in my heart for love." It wasn't about excusing harm or pretending it didn't exist. It was about refusing to let the harm others cause to dictate who I am and who I become, who we are and who we become. Our empathy is an undeniable source of our power and of transformation, not just for ourselves, but for others. Sometimes even for those who have hurt us. And sometimes that feels impossible. But that's the radical part of love, doing what feels impossible because it is what we're called to do. Tendeka's words gave me new insight, but they didn't erase the feelings of unfairness and angst. It's a tension we all face when we're called to love beyond what seems reasonable. So let me circle back to Peter McIndoe, who in a recent TED Talk shared some observation from his birds aren't real experiment. Now, he had expected that the absurdity of the bird-like drone theory would provide some comic relief. He thought he could brush off the negative comments directed at him, reminding himself that he was simply playing a role and this wasn't truly his identity. But that's not what happened. Instead, he found himself surprised and even startled by how deeply it hurt when people dismissed, shamed, and ridiculed him. People approached him, looked him in the eye, and called him stupid, uneducated, and crazy. Some told him that he was what was wrong with the world. People instantly condemned and judged him without ever attempting to understand or even know him. They weren't just questioning his ideas. It was as if his very humanity was being questioned. Ironically, these moments of being vilified and treated as an outsider gave McIndoe amazing insight into how society approaches people on the fringes. He expressed the imperative of shifting how we engage with people who hold fringe or opposing beliefs. He urged us to focus on empathy over confrontation. He figured out that it's not all about facts and logic. It's also about recognizing the emotional needs behind the beliefs. Emotional needs like a desire to feel seen and understood. I don't have to agree with someone to see them. You don't even need to agree with someone to seek to understand why they believe the way they do. When we slow down enough to approach these conversations with curiosity, we create space for authentic connection. McIndoe realized that shame and judgment only push people further away from us and from the truth we might be able to share with them. He explains that talking to conspiracy theorists or political pundits or that uncle or cousin of yours, like they're ignorant and stupid, is actually pushing them further away from the truth. If we want to bring them toward us, it begins by sincerely trying to understand the fears and insecurities driving their beliefs. And I know he's on to something. So what can we do? First, know that the divide isn't just about facts or logic. It's often fueled by emotions. People don't cling to beliefs just because of the ideas themselves. Those beliefs give them a sense of belonging, identity, and validation. Secondly, understand that our deep desire for connection can drive us toward belonging, even when it leads to misinformation or falsehoods. McIndoe's takeaway is that people will almost always choose belonging over belief. Whether it's political extremism, religious fundamentalism, or even conspiracy theories, the issue often isn't about what's right or wrong. It's about people wanting to feel seen, heard, and understood within a community. This is what we all want. So my friends, the work of building bridges isn't just for politicians or leaders. It's for each of us. And it starts in those everyday moments with the people we're closest to and the ones we're most distant from. Ultimately, the tension we carry may be but a reflection of the world's brokenness. And in walking that second mile, we become part of its healing. In this case, walking the second mile means becoming curious and listening in order to see the person who you wholeheartedly disagree with, seeing the whole person. Now, this struggle is part of the journey of seeing others' humanity and maintaining our own. Now, I won't pretend that I've fully reconciled these feelings. No. There are days when the weight of going the extra mile feels too heavy and the bridge appears too far to cross. On those days, I have to forgive myself and hope someone else, maybe you, will be able to do what needs to be done to walk that extra mile. But let us continue to encourage each other so that more and more, when a relationship requires us to walk the extra mile on a path we didn't choose, we will have the will and the capacity to keep going. Because love, when it reaches beyond comfort, can and it will transform both ourselves and our communities. Bishop Tutu Desmond Tutu once said, "It is easy to be cynical, but hope takes courage." And it is that courage to love beyond what feels possible, folks. It is that courage that will help us bridge even the widest of divides. And I know that that won't be easy. It's not easy. But we have each other. And in the end, there's just one thing that makes all the difference. There's only one thing that's worth doing. There's only one thing that we will be proud of when life, our life, is over. And it's love. I love you. Blessed be.